Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Six Hats podcast. And I'm so excited to have Dr. Michelle Woolhouse join us today. So she is an integrative and holistic GP for more than 22 years. She's an integrative medical clinic founder, podcaster, and also facilitates transformational healing immersions which help people embrace their wholeness and find their personal sense of aliveness. Now, which I'm really excited about, she's also the author of the book, The Wonder Within, a heart-led playbook for the anxious, stressed, and burnt out. Now, I'm so excited about this podcast because it's going to help so many listeners, as according to the recent stats, 2 in 5 Australians suffer from a mental health condition, and anxiety is the most common. So welcome, Michelle.
Oh, thanks, Shami. It's great to be here. I'm really excited.
Excellent. So I absolutely loved reading the book, Michelle, and I literally finished it in one evening. It was so engaging, full of pearls of wisdom. And I actually really love the exercises that you put at the end of the chapter, or even in the chapter, and all the stories. But one thing that really stood out right at the beginning, Michelle, was when I read that you suffered from anxiety from the age of 9. And I'd love to start from there, because did you know that you were suffering from anxiety? What was anxiety like as a child? And was it just more upon reflection that you felt this has been going on for many years?
Yeah, I think it was more on reflection. And in fact, I probably didn't really realize that I had the tendency to experience anxiety until I was probably in my late teens, early 20s. And so it was only on reflection that I kind of understood that cyclical, obsessive, ruminating brain was actually really similar to a time when I was 9 years of age. And at the time I was at a Catholic primary school, and the local priest was very, very strict and traditional and old school. And we were learning the catechism. And I was quite a spiritual little kid, actually. And I had a real sense of kind of God essence, I wasn't from a religious family. I just really loved the kind of reverence and sacredness of some of the rituals that were involved. And I remember him telling us that there was a heaven and a hell. I was like, oh, okay, I knew about that essentially. But he also said that God was all knowing and all sensing. I thought, far out, and then the worst thing that you could do was take the Lord's name in vain. And I thought, wow, I mean, you could kill someone, and it was worse to take the Lord's name in vain. So as a child, I was thinking, far out, this is pretty heavy. I mean, this guy is all knowing and all powerful. And if you do something wrong, like swear at him, then you're going to hell. So that was enough to send me into panic. And I used to lie in bed, thinking, saying not very nice things to God, which created this whole sense of anxiety. And then it wasn't until in medical school, actually, when I had a repeat of that kind of experience and realized that, in fact, I had a tendency when I was a child. Yeah, and that was kind of the interesting aspect of learning about the cyclical nature of my particular style of doing anxiety, and recognizing that it was a threat to a sense of safety, and then had to learn ways in which to create safety for myself and almost settle myself down, resettle myself like I was a child, as in like they're there, it's okay, you're not going to hell. And I had to reshape my neurology based on new ways and of experiencing it.
Wow. And you sort of share all of those tools in your book, which is amazing. And you sort of go on a journey. But can I just take you back to burnout? It's unbelievable. I was aware of this Facebook group of 1,000 female GPs in Australia who are burnt out. And for me, that was pretty shocking, because I've been doing it for over 20 years as well. And these GPs may have just been doing it for 2 to 3 years. So I go, what's happening in the system? Like, what's gone wrong? And because all of these are amazing GPs that are compassionate and people need them, the public needs them. So I would love to know more about your burnout journey. Did you know that you were stressed? Did you know that you were reaching burnout?
Well, I think there's sort of two ways to answer that. I mean, yes, I did. I knew I was getting cynical, and I knew that my empathy was kind of lessening. And I had a lot on my plate, sustaining a marriage. I had 2 children, I had a business, and I had thousands of patients, and add that to, your own personal self-care. And I was, also faculty member of, a college, and trying to do a lot of the other things that I'm really passionate about, such as education and podcasting, etc. And I'm one of those people that, loves to say yes to things. It's not an arduous thing to say yes to something. I just sort of uber passionate and just say yes to everything because I really get excited. And so, yes, I did know that I was heading towards burnout, but at the same time, burnout is a really interesting place to be. It's kind of like a past tense. So there is inherent in it and a way that you can only actually see it from the past, looking back. You're like a match. You've sort of, you're a black match. You can't be relit again. And I knew that it was different to stress and anxiety. And so, yes, I was stressed and I wasn't actually very anxious. And so it does have a different quality. There is a different quality to burnout than there is to actual stress and to anxiety. And I think understanding and navigating the differences can actually be really powerful, because I think the therapy is quite different and the needs are quite different depending upon where you're at on that particular spectrum. So it was a hindsight aspect, but in the book, I also explain, there's a beautiful TED talk from an American-based neurologist who is so well-versed on the anatomy of the brain that as she watched herself have a stroke, she could actually watch the parts of the brain become damaged. And so as much as she was fearful and active at trying to seek help, she was also fascinated by the process. And I guess in many ways, because I have such a significant, personal understanding, but also professional understanding of anxiety, stress, and burnout, I was actually fascinated to watch the differences and how it was playing out in my life. And I think, burnout is actually, it's very much a heart-based experience. It's very much a soul-based experience. It's like the light inside you is dim. And whereas anxiety it has a much stronger sort of sense of anxiety and activity and panic and repetitive nature to it. And so I think there's these kind of, and everybody experiences, they do cross over and they merge a little bit. But for me, I think that, in medicine, there's a sense of like a dimness of the light that is kind of almost pathognomonic of the burnout experience.
How would you describe burnout to the point where people can understand, actually, do you know what, I'm going through burnout? Because often, when you're doing long hours, you may be in corporate world, it's actually, embraced, and, that kind of success is actually given a badge of honor. So it's actually really hard to sort of say, actually, this is actually having a negative impact on me, and this could be burnout. How would you define it?
The World Health Organization defines it by 3 different factors. So one is a feeling of exhaustion, or physical fatigue or mental fatigue. And so I'm a person that has a very good level of energy physically. So I didn't get any real physical fatigue, but I certainly got a mental fatigue. I really had to drag myself out of bed. So fatigue was something really distinctive for me, but it wasn't a physical one. But people would get physical fatigue from burnout for sure. The second thing is a sense of cynicism and negativity. So there was like a negativity about things in general. So whether it was negativity about, staffing issues, or that things weren't going to get better, or there was kind of a grey cloud over that. And I'm definitely a deluded optimist by nature. Like, I'm an optimistic person. So I knew that there was something distinctively wrong there with my cynicism and sarcasm and things. That was quite distinctive and not really who I am as a personality. And the third thing is lack of productivity. So, aspects of not feeling productive enough, or alternatively, making mistakes, that you wouldn't normally make, are kind of the 3 common aspects of burnout. But I think in medicine in particular, is an element of, as I was saying before, of a sense of sadness and grief that kind of accompanies burnout as well. Being in a health-orientated field where, part of our job is to care. And when you're not able to really care, that actually adds an extra layer of burden on you, because you kind of know that you sign up to care as well. And so there's a conflict, a kind of internal sort of almost spiritual conflict that happens inside you, particularly when you're trying to maintain a level of professionalism in a profession that is designed to care. And I think that is particular for burnout within medicine, or burnout within health per se.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I love in your book that you go through various techniques, but I love the way you take it through stories. I really want you to share the story, which one of my favorites was the title of Patience, and how missionaries in Africa were actually, being taught patience. If you could share that story, I think it's so awesome.
It was written about 100 years ago by a woman who would commonly write stories from Africa. She lived in Africa. And there was a story of some missionaries that were crossing a particularly difficult part of Africa, and they needed some African trackers to help them get to this particular city or town by a particular day. And so they allowed 5 days for this arduous journey, and they knew that they were going to push the limits to get there at this particular time. So they had about 4 African trackers that were helping them navigate this journey. And they were pushing them very hard. And on about the 3rd day, the trackers, were meant to be packing up and to take them, almost towards sort of the end of the journey. And the lead tracker, who had very, limited language, said to them, "We can't go, we can't move today." And the person running the expedition was like, "Well, why not? We have a time limit. We said we'd be there 5 o'clock on Saturday. We have to move. Like, let's go, come on." And he said, "Well, we can't because we've moved too fast over the ground and we have to wait for our spirits to catch up." And for me, when I read that story, I kind of got chills, to the sense that it felt like life was so racing that it was like my spirit was trying to stop me from going any further. And I felt like I had that real sense. And patience was such an interesting learning lesson for me, because I remember learning about it, when I was way younger, and it was like one of the 7 virtues or whatever. And I thought, that's ridiculous. Like, what on earth has patience got to do with a virtue? But through this whole experience of burnout, I actually really understood the value of patience and the value of working alongside the rhythm of life. And it's not just the rhythm of your life, it's the rhythm of life. It has a rhythm that needs to kind of be danced alongside with. You can't, it's like being on the dance floor and somebody's trying to manipulate your moves. It's like, no one ever likes to dance with someone that's kind of pushing and pulling them. You want to dance to the rhythm and the beat of the song, and that's a little bit like life. And it's certainly one of the greatest lessons that I've taken from this recent challenging life experience that I had.
Such a beautiful analogy, the dance. We forget to just dance to our own. I love that. I think a lot of healthcare professionals can really learn from that. And I just feel like we've gone into this rat race of, right, you've got to achieve this by a certain age and you've got to do all of this study by a certain time. Why? Why are we doing that to ourselves? And that patience was just such a great reminder. Just go to your timeline, your journey, because often I think people are very, we compare ourselves to each other.
We do.
Yeah, and that can just drive us into different paths that we didn't really want. And sort of leading on to that, it's sort of a great reminder that we don't all have to work in a certain way. And when I see a lot of, GPs getting burnt out, really long hours, short time frames to see patients, and like exactly what you said, not really doing a lot of self-care for themselves. So you mentioned this great time when you were in Vanuatu, and it just made me smile because, just imagine my work day if I just went to work and then went to the beach in the afternoon and then did more work, and how, like, in Australia, we're attuned to, right, let's start early, let's finish the patients, let's go home. And it's bang, 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 bang all the time. So what was it like when you were in Vanuatu?
Well, I think there was just so much too, working in such a kind of island / idyllic kind of situation. I mean, for one, it was incredibly interesting medicine, but two, working to the rhythm of a different culture's way of life is extraordinary, because it almost unravels your patterns and neurology. I mean, they closed after lunch, wards were closed, and people would, families would come in, and when the families came in, there was like 24 family members, so there was no point doing a ward round. So we used to catch a little ferry across to this idyllic beach and lie there, and the mangoes would wash up on the beach through the tides. So we'd just have a couple. And then we'd come back. But I think the other thing about working in that particular culture, which was just so rewarding, which is so different to kind of the medicine that we practice in kind of the cities and country and the cities per se, is that the level of reverence that they have for the carer, the doctor or the nurse or the practitioner, was extraordinary. And I think that was part of it. It was a hugely healing aspect, was for the reverence. And interestingly, I saw it in India as well. So people would line up to the Ayurvedic doctor, first thing in the morning to receive their daily dose of herbs. And the reverence that they experienced from receiving the herbs was almost otherworldly, in the sense that it wasn't just a reverence for the person. So we have an altered kind of relationship to reverence in our culture. It's like it's kind of egoistic or arrogant or all of these kind of complex, sort of really, I guess, immature ways of looking at reverence. Whereas in the traditional or more Indigenous cultures, reverence is actually a reverence to nature and a reverence to the knowledge that comes through centuries, through generations, through the trees, through the plants, through the soils. And I think that is really helpful, because as doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals, there is a sense of that you do dedicate a huge part of your life to be in service with others. And the reverence is a very beautiful way to reciprocate the compassion back to the carer, so that the carer can restore themselves so that they can keep caring for the next person. And I feel like the last 10, 15 years of serving in medicine, that's actually really changed. And as a community, I don't think we've really recognised that. And the burnout rates so the current burnout rates, 67% of GPs are either, moderately or severely burnt out. 76% of nurses are burnt out. 1 in 3 New Zealand psychiatrists are thinking of leaving the profession. And it's a huge issue for the community because it just is. And so we really need to look at the way that we care for each other, and not only just caring for ourselves, but caring for each other. So because as we care for each other, we're in fact caring for ourselves.
Absolutely. And what a great reminder. What a great reminder. And those stats are shocking. They're absolutely shocking. And, at the end of the day, it takes years and years of training to get into that, to master that level of care. It's such a shame that they are leaving, because it's going to take years to have more psychiatrists or have more doctors. No, absolutely. On a separate note, I loved in the chapter Albert Einstein, and this was just such a relief to hear it. You mentioned how we are wired to pick up threats more easily than positive feelings, and it's part of our survival mechanism. And I love the fact you mentioned it, because it was like, okay, let's just acknowledge what we're just attuned to, because often we're just sort of like battling against that. We go, why are we waking up with these negative thoughts? Why is it just ruminating? Why can't we sleep? Because of these ruminating thoughts, just how to solve a problem. And I love the fact that you mentioned it. We're just wired that way.
That's how we work. I mean, I think part of the book is I wanted to really kind of almost bring it back to basics for people to actually understand their biology and their neurology. So we, combine that to call that neurobiology, and physiology, which is how the cells kind of talk to each other. And I think it's really important to kind of normalize that for people, because I really think, anxiety, stress, and burnout are really not, you experience the symptoms via the mental health, aspects of our lives. But in fact, they're not a disease process as such. They're just a normal extension of how we actually operate. And, this is how we evolved. So by learning how the brain and the whole body works in a complete form allows us then to properly navigate the solutions that are required for stress, anxiety, and burnout. So, for example, often I felt too, when I experienced anxiety in my early career days, is one of the greatest lessons I learned was to stop fighting myself, to stop fighting the fact that I had anxiety, that I was embarrassed, or that, I also learned stress increased your risk of, chronic diseases. And, I had a lot of health anxiety because, being in medicine and having these diseases presented, in this disempowering, like, oh my God, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen. And no emphasis really on your own empowerment was quite daunting for me and amplified things. And so one of the things that was really powerful was to stop fighting the fact that I had anxiety and accepting that, but also befriending it and seeing it as a warning sign for me to listen a little bit more closely to myself and to my life and to the stories of my life, and see what was happening. And in the book, I also talk about this time that I was referred to a psychiatrist, and that was humiliating. And probably a little extreme from the GP, I think, in hindsight, but nevertheless, it was part of the story. So I'm grateful. But going to see this psychiatrist he had one of those huge desks. I think the desk was about the size of half a tennis court. And I was sort of sitting on the other side of the room, so far away from this tiny guy with a bow tie and tiny beady glasses. And he was asking me about my mother and my father. And I was like, oh my God, it's got nothing to do. And so then when he told me, I think this is just anxiety and you're not going to die from it. And there you go, never saw him again. And I think that was the greatest kind of gift, actually, because it was almost like, okay, well, it was a throwaway line for him, but it was actually a lifeline for me, because I was like, oh, okay, if that's just what it is, then I can deal with that, And from that moment on, it was like as if I carried it along with me rather than shamed myself for having it. And I started to learn to respect it and sit with the discomfort that I was experiencing so that my body could come back into safety. And there's a whole raft of different exercises that can be done in that way that helps a person actually reclaim the safety inside themselves and also the trust inside themselves as well.
Fantastic. I think you share quite a few of the exercises in your book as well. So, no, that's awesome. Which kind of leads me beautifully to talk about self-compassion. Oh my God, when I learned about self-compassion, I literally use it as a drug of just being really kind to ourselves, especially in the medical world. And while you're sort of going into med school, you're in med school, there's a lot of comparison, there's a lot of you cannot get it wrong, and that huge amount of fear. And also, senior doctors would be actually quite scary, to be honest. And so you just grow up with it.
Terrifying.
I know. I was like, how did we do that? And you just go up with the fear of doing things incorrectly. And it could be something really simple. It could be admin or something didn't quite go right in the clinic, and which was out of our control. And now I just use really kind words to myself, knowing that this will flow, but just being really kind. But it's really interesting when I talk to patients about showing kindness to themselves, they actually ask that question, what do you mean? What is self-compassion? So I'd love for you to share what exactly is self-compassion.
Well, self-compassion, I'll often say to people, it's like putting yourself into the soup, So, for example, you can't have a soup without onion. So you're like the onion, you're the onion that you put into soup, unless you've got fructose.
Yeah.
Yes. But I think self-compassion is a way of actually just a shared humanity. So it's actually really acknowledging our humanness and our vulnerability. And for that, really quite frightening. But one thing that I realized a couple of years ago is that I often used to feel very vulnerable when people showed me kindness. And it was quite a game changer in the sense of because I wanted to be okay with everything. I didn't want, I was kind of a hyper independent person who didn't want help, because that would be a reflection of a sense of failure or a sense of vulnerability. And that felt really uncomfortable for me to have that. But what I learned over the years is that I am human. And some people are more naturally kind of able to ask for help in a way. But for me, that was a real sense of feeling very weak. And that was really unhelpful. But it was a lovely sort of symbol to see that. And so when I tried on self-compassion in the book, I sort of talk about it. It is a very sacred experience, and it's really something that really can't be shared, and it's very unique to you. And how you play around in the world of self-compassion is really very personal. And so one of the things that I did was that I would look at myself in the mirror each day and gently put my hands, on my face. And I would look at myself and I would tell myself that I love myself. And I can tell you, Shami, I just felt like the biggest goon for so long. And I remember the first day and I felt really embarrassed, really humiliated, I just wanted to shrink. And I thought it was interesting. I had enough, I guess, courage to persist and do it the next day. And really, it doesn't take that long. Within about 7 to 10 days, it actually started to feel very nice to be able to do that for myself. And then I started to kind of play around with more challenging, difficult emotions. So for me, humiliation was a big one. So somewhere, I don't know why, but humiliation was a big one, and often would feel humiliated for various different kind of reasons. That was kind of my fallback. And so that's when I would trigger into self-compassion through that. And, over the years, that has definitely changed. I don't necessarily have that sense of, who knows? I mean, we never know where some of these kind of the wrestling of our emotions come from. And as much as it's great to explore those things sometimes and pinpoint them, sometimes they're just, we can't explain them. And it's great then to just keep going with the techniques in a way and staying with that discomfort and learning through that, because you honestly don't know what magic comes through just persisting and turning up for yourself.
So true, so true. Now, Michelle, before we leave you today, I'd love for you to share about your new venture, which is hosting retreats both in Australia and Bali. Tell us more. I'm super, super excited.
So it's called Enliven Retreats, and all the info. We've got 4 different curated retreats. So the reason that we started running that, and I have a co-facilitator called Carolyn Hales, who I've worked with for a long period of time. We come together with very different skill sets, which is kind of the magic, really. So I come, with, I guess, the more traditional and scientifically, backed background, and she comes from a much more energetic and mentoring and counseling background. So we come together, almost speak with different words the exact same language. And that's very helpful for people to be held in that space with 2 very different facilitators, because you can take different things from as you need them. And so, yeah, they range from, supporting women to help them, sit with difficult emotions, to understand, elements of process so that they can learn to self-regulate and learn to, I guess, tune into themselves a whole lot more. We do quite a lot of vision and dream work and empowerment work and boundaries, and learning all these really tricky things in an experiential way is critical for taking it from sort of, I guess, an intellectual sort of know-how into an actual heart-based right of this experience. And so they're incredibly powerful. I've worked a lot with some patients of mine that I've known for a long period of time, and I've had the benefit of actually seeing them pre and post retreat. There's definitely incredible, almost non-reversible aspect
Wow.
to them, and that's what has made me really inspired to keep doing them. And so they are amazing.
Amazing. So who's it for? Who needs these retreats?
Yeah, so I mean, we've designed them for women because for one, we believe in the journey of the woman, and we're 2 women as well. And I think women need to learn to turn up for women and to support that kind of feminine journey through our various cultures. And they're really for women who are really looking for new perspectives and new ways to live their life. So we have one called Courageously Me, which is really about activating courage and really stepping into your life. And another one called Wise Radiant Me, which is really about creating that vision and really looking at the things that not hold you back, but more actually like let go of some of the baggage that we tend to collect along the way, and so that we can achieve, the holistic aspect of what we are aiming for. And then awakening wisdom is a lot about reverence and the sacredness. And so that aspect of our lives is, I think, underrepresented, Jamie, I would say, as we kind of are very mechanicalistic and very reductionistic and linear within our culture, and sort of regaining a little bit more of the sacredness to life. And then Birdsong is our foundational retreat. So it's some really basic skill-based techniques to really help anchor people in the process so that they can really then have all of the resources for which to then step in to a whole raft of different opportunities that might come their way.
Amazing. I'm definitely going to check out the website, and we'll put a link in the show notes as well. Absolutely. So before we leave you, Michelle, how do you look after yourself? Because I know you're actually doing a lot at the moment. So how do you sort of set the boundaries? How do you continue with self-care?
Thanks for asking. So I think the basic foundations of my healthcare is, lifestyle medicine. So, sleeping well, eating well, exercising, and mindfulness-based activities are kind of the cornerstone. But I think since this last burnout and through, being supported through a mentoring sort of process, but also understanding process, understanding how I can hold myself and learn from my life rather than being wrapped up within the drama, is actually being very critical for my self-care, so that I can, it's almost like I have, it's like a, what do they call it? Meta awareness, it's the awareness of being aware. And so it's like I have a second head on my shoulder, so I witness myself, I watch myself carefully. And it's that watching and that witnessing is done through an essence of compassion and value, so self-worth. And that has been a profound shift in my self-care. And the other beautiful thing about that is I feel that it's much more sustainable. It's not an exercise program that, you can tweak your back and you let it go. It's like sometimes these foundational skills, you can't unlearn them. That's the beauty of them. You can't, they're particularly unique to me, and so every one of your listeners and yourself will have your own nuanced, subtle, chamois way of doing things, or, Kate's way of doing things. And I think, through the beautiful thing about being a doctor is that I get to have these patients mirroring me back all the time. So accelerated learning there. And then, just, I guess, gathering the wisdom and really owning the wisdom that is innate in me, which is part of the reason why I wrote The Wonder Within, to really encourage people to access their own internal wisdom. And that's probably how I do it.
Amazing. So where can people find you, Michelle?
So I have a website called theholisticgp.com.au, and Enliven Retreats is enliven, ENLIVEN retreats.com.au. And I'm on Instagram, still fuddling my way through that, and LinkedIn. And people are welcome to connect with me through that. And if they're interested in retreats, just drop us a line and we'll let you know which ones are coming up. So we've got one coming up in April in the Yarra Valley and our Bali one in August.
Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm sure people have really enjoyed this podcast. So many insights. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jamie. Anytime. Lovely to talk to you.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au and sign up for the 6-week challenge on how to reduce stress today. Enjoy the journey.